When analyzing our user stories, we researched problems newer students have had when coding to help us determine which were relevant. We also realized some of our user stories were redundant and a more general user story was more appropriate. For example, we want to ease the tedious tasks in terminal like navigating directories, removing entire directories, and text editing. We originally had user stories for each of these tasks, but realized we had an all-encompassing user story relating to having an accessible cheat sheet in terminal with common commands that the student may either not know or may have slipped their mind. In an article by Philip Guo on code reviews, he says lots of pragmatic learning occurs during our real-time code reviews. While having 24/7 access to an instructor or TA could be very helpful, we know this is unrealistic. But what we can do is provide an accessible cheat sheet within terminal that the student can quickly reference. What refers to is actual coding strategies, whereas our cheat sheet would be for the more tedious tasks of navigation and submission. This quick reference won't be pragmatic learning of coding principles, but of the terminal instead. We had similar reasoning for choosing our second user story, which related to having accessible teacher notes within Terminal. Dunsmore, an associate professor at Purdue, said they struggle in their first course or their first few courses. One of our main goals is to ease the stress of new computer science students so that they won't feel that the learning curve is too steep for them. According to Dunsmore, it is common to struggle in the first few courses, but we don't believe that should lead to giving up on the major. Consolidating professor information and tips into the coding environment could help ease the struggle. For example, a student may have missed class and not have the notes. On top of that, the professor could decide what information is provided in this, like common misconceptions or mistakes on an assignment, hence to help get through the assignment and even frequently asked questions. This would also likely lower the amount of office hours time spent, allowing for more deeper conceptual conversations to happen in that time. This was similar to another user story we had that said the user wanted to see a list of frequently asked questions provided by the professor. We felt the user story we went with was more encompassing and would give the teacher more freedom of what information they would like to provide to the student. Our last user story is having a common errors page with debugging advice on each error. In an article written by Matt Tangway Carroll, a senior web developer, he states, by far the greatest evil is getting stuck. Errors are common in computer science, but they can be daunting at first. Debugging is a skill learned early on that helps improve the overall competence of a coder. We don't want to take away the value gained from solving these errors. However, consolidating a list of common errors is just one more way of making the life of these intro-level coders a little bit easier. For example, maybe the professor has an assignment to teach the for loop. Well, a common error associated with that is index out of bound. If a student runs into that issue, they can reference the debugging page and get a short explanation on what that error means. Sure, they could look it up on the internet, but this gives the professor a chance to explain in their own words what this error is and give however much information they would like, helping the student solve their problem. Maybe for an index out of bound error, the professor wants to say, check your for loop statements instead of fully describing the issue. Nonetheless, the students would have a go-to reference point when encountering errors. We think that knowing where to look can mitigate time lost and frustration students experience when searching for solutions to their bugs.
Okay, so Cam broke down some of our user stories, and I'm going to go ahead and start breaking down some of our conceptualizations. So starting off, we're going with our cheat sheet idea, and we're going to start by showing this little help button, which you can then press, which will pull up a little search menu, which will allow you to search for commands which you may have forgotten. The next iteration that we'll be showing is if you were to type a command, and then it would pull up a cheat sheet, just a text file of commands that are similar. So if you were to type list, then it would pop up with something like what is shown. The third iteration of our cheat sheet, we made it a button. So kind of like the first one, you click the cheat sheet button, and then it pops up with a text list of all types of commands that might be useful to you. And then the fourth and fifth designs are kind of similar to the third, and the second being that they are, you type a command and it generates a text file list. It's just different variations on the fourth and now on the fifth. And then finally, after we go through this, you will see our finalized design, which is a help button, which then you can click. If you then click off of the help button, you can go to the coding cheat sheet, which will pull up as a separate window and a text file.
For one of the user stories that we decided on, it was to have instructor content on the terminal to help the student
with their issues and assignments and projects. The first wireframe represented an instructor content help button on the top right. So when the student clicked on the help button, they would be directed to a small tab with instructor content. The second wireframe was the idea that the professor would ask the students to install a plugin which would allow the users to enter a command, for example, hints, that would automatically open an Emacs page with instructor content and explanations about the content. The third wireframe was an idea that every student would have an Odin account. Once an Odin account is created, they would automatically have a directory with multiple text files, and each of these text files would have examples of the code that they are based on with an explanation. We chose to do a high fidelity wireframe on the second low fidelity wireframe, which represents the professor asking the students to install a plugin which would allow them to enter a command, for example, hints. That is the one that we chose to do the high fidelity wireframe for.
Cameron Clark here doing the low fidelity errors. For this first wireframe, the user is logged into Odin, and we have the help button. In the second image, the help button is clicked, and you can see the common errors. The common errors button is clicked, and the shown common errors are displayed. In the next wireframe, the common errors is always up for the user to view for easy access. In the next wireframe, for this solution, there was a command made by the instructor which would show the common errors. So they could just do common errors into the terminal and it would show them. For the last wireframe, this had an automatic system that when an error occurred would show up and display the common error that is associated with what happened to the user. For the high fidelity, you have the user logged into Odin and the help button in the top right. And here's what the help button drop down menu would look like before clicked. After clicking the help button, a drop down list appears with options. Help is shaded to indicate it has been pressed. The user clicks the common errors option in this frame and it is shaded to show it has been selected. The user has clicked on common errors and the tab has been generated at the bottom, showing that it has opened up, but the user is still currently on the home window, and that is indicated by shading. Lastly, the user switches over to the common errors tab, but clicking it with their mouse. Shading has switched to that tab, and an example page of common errors found by the instructor is presented to the student.